Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another Dokkan Battle Animation Analysis video. And ladies and gentlemen, oh boy, do we have a doozy of a video for you today. Of course, talking about the boy AGL LR Ultimate Gohan, the Gohan who is coming out tonight at the time of this video's upload. This is a very interesting video that we have today because this has been one of the most decisive units that I have ever seen, honestly, when it comes to the animations. And it's so funny because I feel like it's pretty unanimous most of the time in the community. And of course, there's always a couple people who are like, oh, well, I think they're good, or, you know, I don't think that they're so good, right? You always have a couple of sticklers. But I feel like for the most part, generally people pretty much agree on the animations, right? Even sometimes being like, yeah, I still like it, but they're not that good, or these are just not good, right? These are straight up trash, right? These are fantastic, so on and so forth. But this one has literally been either way. I've either seen people say that, like, this is the worst thing that mankind has ever created. Or I've also seen people be like, yeah, they're not that bad. What are you talking about? You're over-exaggerating. So, we are going to go through these today, and we are going to decide by the end how I feel. Where do I stand on these animations? Now, I'm going to tell you right from the get-go, ironically enough, this is probably one of the only times where I don't think I actually agree with either side really, and that is another reason why I love doing these videos, because obviously there's only so much you can get from looking at the animations and just watching them through, right? Which at this point I feel like my opinion is simply, well, they're all right. They're not like the worst thing that I've ever seen. There's definitely some good, there's definitely some bad, but I don't think they're as bad as people are making them out to be. But as you guys know, a lot of the time when it comes to these videos, you know, my opinion either changes or stays the same by the end of the video, right? So we'll see what the result is by the time we're done with this video, and that's why I always like going through these. As well, for today's video, because obviously, you know, I'm not doing this on the day that these animations came out, we not only have the video from iKevinX for the comparisons, we also have the video from Jihad, and obviously both of them bring different things to the table when it comes to the comparisons, so we'll be looking at both. And as well, we have a little bit of a interesting comparison video here that I wanted to bring up that I thought was very interesting, that I retweeted a little while ago when the animations first came out. But as per usual, let's go ahead and go through the animations first at 1x speed, and then we will watch them in the slow-mo. Now, also keep in mind, right, as per usual, I always like to preface these videos with, I am by no means an animation professional or an animator or anything like that. I just look at the funny PNGs that make these Dokkan assets up all the time, and not to mention have done these videos for such a long time now that I have a pretty good idea of what makes a solid looking Dokkan animation. I still can't believe they referenced this, by the way. Obviously, we'll talk about it when we get to that animation, but of course, that's from the fight with Gohan and Goku in Dragon Ball Super that infamously doesn't really look that good, so I'm kind of surprised that they included that, but I guess maybe they just needed something to include. As well, before I even like say anything about Gohan himself, bro, what was even the point of including Piccolo? Like, I don't know, I'm a little bit like mixed on it, to be honest, because on one hand, I'm all for, you know, like having cards where there's more characters in the card art that are just like a part of the animations, right? Because obviously Piccolo is in the intro. But why would they not give Piccolo a unit super attack? There he is, the boy's given a cameo. Why would they not give him a unit super attack? Because I feel like it's a little bit, not deceptive, but I guess misleading would be the right word, right? Where it feels a little bit misleading because usually when it comes to, you know, like card arts, if there's a character in the card art, either they're like a part of the active skill or something, or they're in the unit super attack, right? Like they're in the animation somehow like that. And I guess, yes, Piccolo is in the intro, but hello, Nano. Why did that pop up when I had it on loop? Nano jump scare, bro. Either way, though, I don't know. I do feel like that is kind of misleading. Like, again, I understand he's right here, but every time there's a card art, I assume that means the unit is going to play a very big role, and Piccolo is quite literally there for, like, all of 5 seconds, and then he's also there, right? So, I don't know. Just a little bit weird, to be honest with you. But let's go ahead and go from the beginning. Let's go ahead and hit us with the slow-mo. By the way, gotta say, the intro OST for this guy is so good. And I know somebody on Twitter mentioned it. Actually, let me pull it up. Somebody on Twitter being me, posting a YouTube comment that someone left on the intro OST. This is actually super cool, I'm not gonna lie. The beginning of the song, basically, it's like, oh, it's unclear who's coming because they're like, oh my gosh, what's that key that's approaching? And then, you know, obviously when Gohan appears, it changes to basically like a more heroic theme that's kind of a little bit more along the lines of, you know, Gohan. And not to mention, right, it's a little bit different than the typical Dokkan OST, or Dokkan OST, Gohan OST. I mean, at this point, Gohan basically is Dokkan, bro. Look at Gohan Beast. Regardless, though, that obviously, you know, he's changed in this moment because, of course, he has the ultimate form. I think that's so cool, obviously, looking for that extra depth in music, and I think it's pretty clear that that's what the devs are going for with this song, which should be the song playing in the background of this video, so I think that's really cool for the intro. Regardless, though, let's go ahead and take a look at the animation. So obviously, we start off with Piccolo here, right? Obviously, looking like, huh? Who's that? I think this looks fine, right? Obviously, pretty nicely animated. I like that, obviously, for this. They have a little bit of animation with Piccolo's cloak fluttering in the wind. This would have been extremely boring if it would have just been, like, Piccolo standing there, and then it would have just been this PNG with, like, the, you know, the anime, like, lines, you know, like the POW lines, basically just being there. So I'm glad that they added the cape, because obviously it makes this shot a little bit more interesting, right? And then, of course, you have Gohan fly in. This shot looks really good. I like this one a lot, actually. It's interesting, too. You kind of, like, can't tell in this shot, but Gohan is flying forward very, very slowly. Like, his body basically just gets bigger and closer to the screen very, very minimally through that whole shot. But I think that's great, because in full motion, it makes it look a lot better. And obviously, it's that subtle movement that's always, you know, something that's super beneficial for these units to make them feel a lot more lifelike. So that is very, very cool to see, right? But then obviously, with Gohan flying in, you have those nice effects in the background. And of course, you have Goten go, "That's my brother!" You know, and so this shot's pretty good too. Obviously, it is just them talking. And of course, with these intro animations, right, these animations tend to be pretty simple because it is just supposed to be an introduction to the character. The slide looks pretty good, right? Definitely think that they cooked on that. I like the little dust that kind of dissipates afterward. And then, of course, you have this shot of Gohan, right, which looks really good. And is also the SSR art as well as the same scene, which is pretty cool. But yeah, very, very nice looking intro, right? Again, nothing too crazy, but it introduces all the characters. It introduces, you know, obviously Gohan himself, right? And it's a good way to do it. Again, kind of funny that Piccolo's there and then he basically just doesn't show up again, but it is what it is. So we're going to go through these animations, by the way, with the comparisons. For every animation, we'll watch through it on the two videos, right? So we'll watch through it pretty quick on both of them. I know iKevinX's is obviously longer because he likes to kind of pause and dissect a little bit more. So we'll do his first, and then we'll see what Jihad has to offer with his, right? It's obviously referencing some different manga panels, some different shots from the anime, right? Which is really, really cool. You know, very, very simple one for this one, obviously, but it's cool that they even still... Wait, what? Your head is huge on your neck. Oh, yeah, it looks even bigger in that shot. That's kind of interesting. But anyhow, yeah, no, they do a good job of obviously referencing a bunch of panels. This is pretty cool too, obviously, that it's like, obviously this is the same scene, but in the anime it's structured differently. But it's cool that they actually reference the manga panel a little bit more here, because you can see that's kind of where the characters are placed. And not to mention, right, Super Boot is basically cut off the side of the screen, which makes sense because obviously, you know, it'd be kind of weird to have him in the animation for this particular one anyway, because obviously he would be like the enemy that they're fighting. For Jihad's version, I think he did something similar, right, where he got that particular manga panel, right? Basically the same thing, but I always do like to watch both of these because I think it's interesting to see what they both come up with, because sometimes the both of them have two different references. I think we'll actually watch Jihad's first next time, but either way though, yeah, I think overall, right, this animation is very simple, and I think that they did a good job with it, right? There's nothing really too crazy out of the ordinary just yet. By the way, for this video, the one where it's this little comparison, we'll talk about this at the very end, because I think this is something that's kind of bad, to be honest, with this animation, but I feel like it's something that I want to use as like a point to wrap up once we're done with this. So let's go ahead then and move into the first animation, which I believe is the 12 key super attack. So of course we have Gohan walking up here, and already we got my first problem with these animations, baby. Oh boy. So this is definitely a case of, you know, I say it, I swear, in like half of these animation analysis videos, but man, they could have definitely used some more frames here. So obviously this scene of Gohan standing there, right? I believe, I think he's just standing there in the anime, which again, we'll see in a second, I suppose. But, you know, he's walking forward, and you have this shot of him turning that, I gotta be honest with you, bro, I don't think this looks that good. If I'm keeping it a $150 with you, it really doesn't have enough frames for the full turn, and not to mention Gohan's head looks very awkward, right? I think it doesn't help the fact that from this front-on angle, Gohan? How did I say that, bro? Gohan has a little bit of a wider face, and not to mention super thick neck in this scene. Holy cow, bro. And then you immediately change to this, which is like smaller head, right, on the neck. I think it's just a little bit off-putting. Once you finally get to this piece of art, it doesn't look so bad. Also, I just realized this kind of looks like this is Gohan's thumb, where it's like his neck right there that's above his fingers. But obviously, that's just part of his chest. That's what that's supposed to be. Anyhow, yeah, I think it just looks a little bit awkward in like that first initial turn. Like once the follow through of the turn is there, it looks fine. But that initial going from like the front on look to then the side face looks definitely a little bit strange. Regardless, though, obviously, then transitioning to here, we have the card art, which is cool. I will say that obviously for this card art, I'm sure you're probably all well aware by now, but they finished the reference to that original piece of art that they referenced with Goku's art by obviously having this one and then adding Piccolo because he wasn't in that original piece of art. But it's cool, and I guess that kind of makes sense for the sake of the celebration, right? Regardless, though, when it comes to the rest of Gohan, right, we have him fly in, which looks fine, right? I like the little anime speed lines that they got on him. Kind of weird proportions, I will admit. Like, looking at this, his chest is enormous. The top of his arm, right, is super thick, but super short. And then it looks like from his elbow down to his, you know, like his knuckles, he has like baby hands or baby arms. Why? Like the bottom, you know, from the elbow down to the wrist, it already looks way too small in the proportions. And then the hand literally looks like a baby hand, but it still looks too big for how big the bottom half of the arm is, but it still looks too small for how big it should be with how big Gohan looks, and for how big his arm looks from the elbow up. The proportions here are really strange. Not to mention, does he just not have another arm over there? Like, I know it's because it's off camera, right? But it looks kind of weird because the arm would still be in the camera, would it not? So strange. Yeah, like, look at it like this, bro. Why does his arm look like that? It looks like his arm got inflated like a balloon almost. But his body's still too big. I don't know. The proportions here are very, very strange. Regardless, though, moving to obviously here, of course, we have a Stinky Sprite moment. That is another thing that you are going to find is pretty consistent with these animations, unfortunately, is because the sprites do kind of take a little bit of a focus. That is just another unfortunate thing with, you know, using these references for Ultimate Gohan, and of course they kind of had to do this with, you know, of course, Tech Ultimate Gohan is better Ultimate Gohan, right? Where, of course, because of the way that he's fighting and just the way that the fight progresses, it's hard not to use these sprites and not have them be a little bit more front and center. And unfortunately, kind of like we were talking about in the 3Ku video, there are just some things that because of the way that Dokkan works and the way that it functions with its animations, is just kind of the way things have to be, and they won't ever be better in terms of the animations unless they completely revamp the way that some of the stuff in the game works. And especially in this case, obviously, that being the Stinky Sprites. Moving on, though, we obviously have Gohan come into frame. Oh boy, this animation is a little weird looking. I ain't gonna hold you. So, first of all, I kind of wish they would have just had Gohan fly in like this. I know this is only one frame where he's sort of like looking up and then coming in, but I feel like it's a little bit of a weird change. I kind of wish they would have just had it stick like this. The thing is that's so weird here is that, like, it's just, again, static PNG, right? as he comes in. I wish they would have had, like, maybe his pants flapping in the wind or something, or his hair moving in the wind, rather than just, you know, PNG going. Then you change from this one to his legs coming in a little bit, and again, right, they basically are just twisting it until they get to the kick. Once again, Gohan's proportions here are just so strange. Like, his leg on the one that's closer to the quote-unquote camera looks like it's too long, and then the one that kicked Boo looks too short. I understand it's kind of supposed to be a matter of perspective, but it just looks like not correct, if I'm being honest with you. There's ways to do perspective that look really good, and we've seen that in Dokkan before, where, you know, like a fist is close to the camera, and so the fist is super big, and as it goes back, the character gets smaller because they're far away, excuse me, from the camera. That looks cool, but this just looks a little bit strange, like his proportions again. And also, not to mention, the yellow effects, we're going to have to look at that when we look at the reference. But I feel like they don't really, like, fit from the angle that he's kicking. Like, he's kicking up. Why is it like Swords of Revealing Light is coming down and striking the man from the heavens? I don't know. And then not to mention, like, here, right? Obviously, it being, like, perpendicular to Gohan rather than parallel with him. And then it's finally here, like this, I feel like makes more sense for the kick. I guess they just had it kind of go everywhere to be more like, oh, look at the extravagance. I don't know. But regardless, though, when it comes to Gohan himself, yeah, again, this is just the PNG twisting, bro. We have been over this so many times in these videos. And not to mention, I thought that we were done with this type of thing when it comes to animations. Always with this thing, right, with this type of scenario in a Dokkan animation, they should always have some minimal movement to really drive the animations home and make them feel like they're a lot more new looking. And make them feel a lot more modern, right? Literally just Gohan basically like recoiling his leg a little bit from the kick, right? Obviously moving his individual body parts a little bit more. That's the type of thing where I think that it's something that people don't really notice like consciously or like off the top of their head when they're watching these animations, but I definitely think it's a contributing factor when you look at these and sort of subconsciously you're thinking, yeah, these don't look as good, even if it's like, you know, you're like, I don't know why as much, right? But then obviously dissecting it, you can kind of figure it out. I feel like that is just one reason, because when you see those minimal movements, it makes the animations feel so much more clean, right? Because it makes it feel less like, oh, this is a PNG turning on the screen. Instead, it would make it feel like, oh, this is Gohan kicking Super Boo, right? Moving on from this scene, though, we do have the Dust Clouds kick up, which does look pretty good. Do they reuse that first Gohan? This one right here, where his head is peeking in, do they reuse that from when he first came into the shot? Hold on, let's see. We need to go forward here a little bit. They do, I think. Yeah, here to... Let's see. Is it the same? I'm trying to... Oh no, Gohan's already flying forward, my bad. Right here. It would be then... It looks the same to me, but it could be different because it's hard to, like, obviously pause on that exact frame. It looks very similar. I can't tell because obviously I can't, like, put the frames side by side with the current setup that I have. I think it is, though. If it's not, it's very similar. But either way, though, moving on from that, we obviously have Gohan chase down Boo right through the smoke, which looks good. And here, I will say, right, I'm glad that for this little sequence of the punches... they do kind of move his hair a little bit, but it's really weird in the way that they do it, right? It's not like it's flowing in the wind, right? Like, as he's moving forward here, they keep the hair static for a little bit, which is really strange, right? And it also looks very disheveled, but I guess, again, this is supposed to be like it's fluttering in the wind, but it's more like they're faking it fluttering in the wind, if that makes sense. Like, it's kind of like they're trying to, you know, like, almost half do it, or, like, bootleg it, right? Where it's like... They're trying to make you feel like that the hair is flapping around, but it's really not, because even, you know, in animations like this where you have characters moving forward, there are animations that I've seen where plenty of times they just have the character's hair flapping around in the wind, you know, even when they're doing all these punches and stuff like that. But I think the sequence of punches looks fine. Nothing too crazy. I do like the subsequent ones, right, with obviously this. This is always... Did they reuse that asset again? Hold on. I saw that as I was talking about the thing where it's cool whenever we have angles like this, is what I was going to say, is it's like first person, right? I always like when they do this because it's a lot more unique, and I think it's a lot more interesting, and it definitely makes for, you know, some more fun animations. And people always love these too. People always point out like, oh my gosh, you know, first person Dokkan. It is always really cool to see, I'm not going to lie. So dude, they reused the asset again. What? Okay, so here's the thing with this, right? Like, I feel like there's a fine line with this, right? Because sometimes you need to reuse assets because it's like literally the same scene that's being referenced again. Excuse me. Or sometimes, right, it just kind of makes sense for them to do it because then it like saves resources, or it's just like, you know, easier, or it's like, well, you know, it's a similar looking thing so they can do it. But I don't know, man. Reusing the same thing for 3, you know, times in the same animation? Like, this feels a little bit like they're cutting corners rather than, you know, it being for like a good reason, right? Because sometimes when we watch these animations and we see stuff reused, there's a justifiable reason as to why that's the case. But when it comes to something like this, I feel like it's not as justifiable. Like, for me, this just feels like, yeah, they're just being lazy, basically. Alright, so we then have Gohan come in, right? I feel like this angle is also a little bit weird with him flying in like this. The elbow also feels like it has, like, no impact. It's really weird with the way that he comes up. We're going to have to see how this is referenced in the anime here. Because this does not really feel like it has a ton of impact, right? And, like, the way that he comes in feels like poorly executed for the attack that's there. I don't know. It really doesn't feel like that impactful. And not to mention, also, this is really weird, too, in the way that this is cut. Because you have Gohan mid-air, right, hitting Boo. But then, bam, we're on the ground. What? That doesn't really make sense. I know I have never really been a fan when they do jump cuts, right, in Dokkan, right? I've never really been a huge fan of that because I always think that it doesn't really look that good. And at least with most of the jump cuts in the game, I feel like it kind of makes sense, I suppose, for the most part, right? There's definitely some examples where it doesn't, but I feel like at least it makes sense in the regard of like, yeah, you can understand that this scene jumped to this scene, but you just didn't see it happen, right? It sort of happened like quote unquote off camera is the way that your brain fills it in. But this just doesn't really make sense at all to me. Like, when I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, how did Gohan get from the ground to here? It kind of feels like those YouTube videos where they skip ahead for an anime clip because they're trying not to get copyright claimed. So they skip around the episode. That's what it kind of feels like, honestly. You have this shot of Gohan squatting, which is okay. I feel like his face looks a little bit funny here, to be honest with you. But maybe it's just me. Also, is the camera, like, shaky? Am I tripping out? Like, as the camera then zooms past him, does it look like it shakes a little bit rather than kind of being like a smooth transition here? Like, am I like losing my marbles on this, or do y'all see this? Like, as it zooms in here, I think it's fine, but then as it pans across him, I swear it almost like shakes a little bit, or it's not like even in the way that the camera is. I don't know. It's harder to tell when you're doing like the frame by frame like that because obviously it's paused, but when you're looking at it like this, I swear it shakes a little. I don't know. Maybe I'm just, like, seeing things on that. Could definitely be. But I suppose it makes sense that this scene feels a little bit, like, kind of shoved in there. Because obviously then as Gohan's fist comes towards the camera, which this shot does look good. And I like that they have the little bit of obviously making it blurry. And they obviously have him clench his fist, too. Which is pretty cool, right? You can actually see his fingers close because they're not, like, in a full fist yet. Which is pretty cool, actually. But yeah. This, of course, is the scene from DBS that we were talking about before, which again we'll see in the reference later. But it's interesting that this was the scene that they decided to use, and maybe that's kind of why the transition to the scene feels so out of place, because it's not in the original sequence of, you know, like moves that Gohan does. And Dokkan has done plenty of times before where you know, they do a good job of basically making these scenes flow together, but I feel like this is an example of where they don't flow together that well. Regardless, we have the punch followed up by the ki blast, and oh, oof. it's a little bit wonky. I'm gonna be honest with you with the way that this whole thing is executed. It doesn't help that the actual scene from DBS is a little bit weird in and of itself, right? Every time I watch that GIF, I just like cringe a little bit because I swear it looks a little strange. But right, you obviously have the fist basically buried into him. The Ki Blast looks fine, right? I like the lighting, honestly. It looks really cool. But I feel like the movement looks strange. This could also partially be due to the stinky sprite for sure, right? Because obviously it looks really weird with the sprite basically being raised off the ground in this position, right? Just with the like actual HD assets rather, excuse me. You can definitely tell that the sprite feels extremely out of place. This was another thing I was talking about earlier, that they kind of focus on the sprite, so it almost like it's not really the fault of the animations, but it feels like it brings down the animations because, of course, you have to look at the disgustingness on the screen. But either way, I feel like the way that Gohan moves his arm here looks a little bit like... It's, again, the difference in movement when it comes to these Dokkan animations where it's like, okay, this is Gohan raising his arm rather than, oh, this is a bunch of different pieces that they put together that are a bunch of PNGs and they're moving them in tandem to then make it look like Gohan's moving, right? I feel like sometimes when it comes to the animation, they really nail it in terms of the way that the animation looks to then kind of get that more movement effect that feels a lot more natural, and then sometimes they end up with a case like this where it doesn't feel as natural and it looks a little bit wonky to me anyway, right? Regardless, this is definitely not so great, right? Obviously transitioning from this, there is not a single frame in between Gohan, you know, like moving from the squatting quote-unquote position to then like standing straight up. This is literally unacceptable for a modern unit. Like I'm sorry to say, but this is literally unacceptable for especially a modern premium LR to have something like this, a jump like this in 2024. Are you kidding me, bro? This is absolutely ridiculous. This is honestly unacceptable. This is something that I expect. If I see this in the modern day, I'm like, okay, a free-to-play unit has something like this because they're free-to-play. You know, they're cutting corners and they're not going to be as premium as, you know, like a premium unit, right? But even so, I don't even think we've seen a lot of that in some of the more recent stuff, like with Broly and Trunks, and obviously the new Kid Goku, Krillin, and Bulma, right? Like, even so, I think that there was still some stuff that you could clearly tell they were free-to-play, but this feels like something that would belong in a free-to-play animation, this jump between the poses. That's a bit of a yikes. Not to mention, Gohan's movement is not good on the actual step itself, right? Because you have him in the position of like he's walking forward. That's also the other thing that doesn't help. It would maybe feel a little bit better if his feet were planted, but the implication is supposed to be that he's already mid-walk. And then they had him like slide forward, right? Where he's not even like actually walking before they then have the PNG appear of him. Finally his leg moves up a little bit and then his leg goes out. And then again, bam, they pose change right into, you know, the arm being extended out. Like, bro, come on. This is unacceptable in 2024. And like, that's the other thing too. This is a yellow coin LR, and I would put this Gohan, at least for like this animation for sure, way below the stuff that the Ginyu Force was cooking up, bro. Like, I don't know. It's kind of disappointing to see, I'm not going to lie. Either way, we then have the Ki Blast. I do like the coloring in this scene. It's really, really good. I love the background and the ground. Looks good. Obviously, the blue enveloping Gohan looks pretty cool. And this is actually very well done. I have to give them credit where credit is due for this. Finally, they have a little bit of Gohan reacting, right? And not only that, a lot of little minimal movement, excuse me, is what I was going to say, right? Not only do you have Gohan's hair fluttering in the wind here, finally, right? To obviously kind of emphasize the blast, right? And you also have Gohan's clothes fluttering in the wind. Again, this is another fantastic example of minimal movement that should be all throughout the animations, right? Like in that kick, this is something that was needed in the kick, I feel like, with his clothes flapping. And obviously you can see that his body moves a little bit, right? his arm that's not extended, right? You can see it obviously lowering down a little bit. Obviously, I'm going backwards right now, so it's raising up. But, you know, in this scene, right, after it lowers down, right, you can see his arm, you know, going down a little bit, right? Gohan's arm that was extended out is kind of relaxing a little bit, coming towards his body. He's leaning back a little bit more, right, as the light begins to envelop him. This is the type of thing that is so great in the Dokkan animation that makes these animations feel so much more lifelike rather than just PNG sliding around the screen. And this is what I expect to be a constant in these animations in the year of 2024. So, yeah, definitely not great for the rest of the animation, but for this, fantastic, right? I do like this end shot a lot. I will definitely tell you that. I really, really like this angle. This will also end up being a KO screen, so I think that that is pretty cool. I will say the only thing is the cycle of the hair flapping in the wind, I feel like looks a little bit weird. It definitely just looks like a repeating video rather than the hair like a little bit more naturally flapping in the wind, right? I'm glad that it's included because I'd rather it be there than it not be there for sure. But it definitely feels like there's not like a... Like, it doesn't feel like that it's actually naturally flapping in the wind. Again, it's like the video is just on loop of the hair goes back one way and then snaps back to the front, right? Same thing with the bang, right? It goes one way and then snaps back to the front. It doesn't really feel like it's blowing as much because the clothes too also follow that same pattern. It's kind of like somebody is like pulling on the hair and the clothes at the same time, right? And just kind of like whipping them one direction and then pulling them back and forth, right? I think that's kind of the best way that I can describe it. All right, so let's go ahead. Holy cow, we had a lot to say about that 12-key super, huh? Let's go ahead and take a look at it from the boy Jihad. So, let's see. So, oh yeah, there's that piece of art, by the way, that I was talking about that Goku's art also matches with. So is this... Okay, so this is a different scene. No wonder this felt so weird. Interesting. Yeah, kind of tying those two scenes together. No wonder that felt a little bit weird in the actual thing. Funny enough, I feel like even Dokkan's faces were a little bit better. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, bro. Like, in the anime, right, for the scene where Gohan kicks, right, if we go back to that, we can even use the anime as an example of this, right? When Gohan kicks up with Boo, right, you can see that after the kick, he has a little bit of movement there, right? To obviously emphasize it, right? That feels a lot more natural, right? That's his body reacting and sort of recoiling a little bit. Rather than just PNG turning, right? That's the huge difference that makes this feel so much better, right? And so much lifelike, so much more lifelike, I should say. Again, here's a good example, too, of, like, the difference in why this looks so much better in the anime than it does in Dokkan, right? Where the hair's movement as Gohan is going crazy, right? And again, I do think that, honestly, Dokkan did improve upon the faces, right? Like, I feel like the faces feel more consistent in this essay, right? In the Dokkan one than they do in the anime. Even though they don't look bad in the anime, of course. But, right, Gohan's hair, you can tell the difference in the movement in the anime version feels a lot more natural in the way that it kind of just flows with each punch, right? It feels like it's actually bouncing, right, as he's punching forward, right? These kind of like rapid, crazy looks. And in Dokkan, it kind of feels like that they're trying to do that, but they're sort of faking it by not having enough frames in between, right? And so it doesn't give that same effect that you have in the Dokkan one, or in the anime one, rather, excuse me. Okay, so no wonder that felt a little bit weird in this shot, because for this, right, you can see that, wow, that's really strange. So, does it continue right from the punches? No, okay. Because it's so close up, that's why it feels so off in the Dokkan one, because they have him fly in, and then have this close-up, right, of him getting hit. Rather than in the Dokkan one, it's so far away. Why? I feel like it would be easier to make the close-up one, wouldn't it? I feel like it's almost more work to make the far-away one. That's so strange. Why would they choose to do that? It would have looked so much better if it was closer up, and it would have flowed so much better with, like, the rapid-fire close-up punches that happened right before that. That's so weird. So, yeah, again, they then cut directly into this scene from DBS, right? And, again, this scene from DBS, right? We're not even going to talk about, like, the animation quality of the scene because, you know, that's kind of here nor there for the sake of this. But, right, as you can see, right, you can kind of tell why it looks a little bit awkward in the Dokkan one, too, because the scene already looked kind of awkward in the, you know, in the anime. But either way, it's interesting that it then kind of cuts to this as a reference. That was pretty creative on the Dokkan team's part, for sure. And then, of course, we cut to this. Yeah, here's the difference, right? I think you can tell, again, when it comes to the anime, right, and the Dokkan version of this with the hair flapping in the wind, right? It looks so much more natural. And I guess the other thing is, too, it kind of only flaps for, like, a second, basically, before it kind of calms down in the anime. But, you know, they were trying to kind of keep it flapping in the Dokkan version, but it still feels a little bit awkward. Let's go ahead and look at iKevinX's version to see if we got anything different here. And again, we'll be able to see some of these manga panel references as well, right? True. Funny, I kind of disagree on that one, to be honest, but that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. Oh, interesting. Is he... I didn't know. Is iKevinX... Does he... I don't know. I don't know where he's from. That's interesting, because I always notice that the panels that he uses, excuse me, are never in English, so... I love this elbow. Shame it lacks impact. That's what I said! See, I'm glad me and my man are on the same wavelength for most of this stuff. Yeah, okay, so obviously the scene from DBS once again. Interesting that he found out. I love this Gohan. Okay, yeah, so that's really interesting. I guess that kind of makes sense when it comes to the hair flapping, right? That it is just kind of flapping for only a moment in the anime one, whereas in Dokkan it's flapping more. But it feels a lot more awkward in the anime one, I feel like. Like, it looks a little goofy, honestly. It kind of looks like a YouTube poop where someone is speeding it up, to be honest with you. By the way, that is something that I want to do at the end of this video, too, because I know that's kind of like an argument that people make a lot of the time when it comes to these animations. It's like, oh, it'll look so much better in 2x speed. But, like, that shouldn't be something you should say. It should just look good regardless. Alright, so then we move on to, I believe, let me check before we get into this. Yeah, so this is the 18 key super, because then after that is the unit super attack, and then after that is the active skill. Okay, so this is the standard 18 key super attack for Gohan, right? I like this establishing shot, first of all, with him obviously stance up there. I think that that is really, really cool. And this shot right here is a direct reference to the manga, so that is pretty cool. And this shot does look good. This is a perfect example. Now, it feels a lot more natural because obviously it's not, you know, cutting between like fighting scenes. But this is a great example of something that feels supernatural for a cut. Well, not supernatural in terms of like ghosts. I mean supernatural in terms of like super space natural. So, when they go from this of Gohan obviously looking at Boo, cutting to a shot that's almost like from Boo's perspective, sort of, right, is a really good way to cut the scene, right? That's a perfect example of a way that this scene should be cut to make it look good. Okay, so we then obviously have Gohan squat down, right? And then, of course, have him jump up into the air, which I think looks good. And it's cool, too, because, again, you know, I was talking about this in previous videos. It really feels like they've been doing sort of pseudo intro animations for a lot of these supers, and that's definitely what this feels like, because this animation could not even have this beginning part. It could literally just start from here, right, with Gohan squatting down and jumping, but I'm glad that they included that beginning bit because it's really cool, right? So, of course, you have the iconic Gohan kick, and I think that this does look pretty good, to be honest with you. I will say, this particular shot here, they definitely nailed it, right? I feel like this animation has so many things that I look at, and I'm like, yucky. But there's also a bunch of things in here that I'm like, this is really good and really cool. So it's such a mixed bag. I know, obviously, I've been kind of hard on it in the 12 key, but that's because the 12 key, I feel like, is not as good as some of the other stuff that we have coming up. But this looks good to me, right? I think that the hair flapping looks perfect. Obviously, Gohan's clothes are flapping in the wind, just like I was talking about before, right? Obviously, Gohan's flying in the air, and they have it kind of like where the cameraman is basically following Gohan in the air. Never forget, the cameraman is undefeated, bro. Basically, the cameraman is like following Gohan mid-air, right? But obviously, then the anime speed lines and clearly like the way that the ground is formatted, right? You can clearly tell that everything is moving around him, right? The idea that they're trying to portray is very clear with that, which is super cool, right? And obviously then you have him move forward even a little bit more. And I love the way that obviously here, right, they even have it so that, you know, he shoots off the screen to really emphasize how fast he's moving. Now, by the way, I do want to comment with the hair. It is kind of funny if you notice, right? I don't know if you'll notice unless you really look at it, but I think there is actually one frame here that is an error. Because obviously you have Gohan's hair fluttering in the wind here, but this, where is it? Right there. What did they do to you, Gohan? This definitely looks like a thing to me, because I've seen them do this in other essays sometimes, where it's like, they're not trying to show both of the hair assets. That is going to be something that is like transitioning between the two different hair assets, because obviously, you know, it's supposed to be like the hair is, again, flapping in the wind like that. I've seen this before. Usually when I've seen it, it's an error. I think, in fact, one time, I swear they, like, changed this. Like, this happened in an animation, and then they updated it later and was like, oops, sorry, that was not supposed to be there. I could be misremembering that for sure, but regardless, though, I think that's what this is. I don't think that that's that big of a deal, because it is only on screen for one frame. Who knows? Maybe they'll change it. Maybe it'll just stay there forever, but I doubt that you'll even notice it unless you're watching this video now. Ha ha ha. It does look very funny, though. I'm not going to hold you. Anyway, moving past that, we have Gohan fly in with the kick, which I really, really like. It's interesting that they actually, like, hold it there for a second. I want to see this in full motion real quick, because it looks really weird in the slow-mo, right? It's, okay, I still feel like that's a little strange. They kind of, like, hold it there, and then they have, like, the effect. I feel like Gohan and Boo should kind of be, like, moving forward a little bit, because usually when anime like to emphasize on a punch, right, they kind of have the characters slightly moving to, you know, represent and to, like, tell your brain, okay, they're still in motion, but it's like they're giving you a slow-mo, rather than, like, you know, it doesn't really make sense that Gohan's, like, using the force to hold Boo mid-air with the kick, you know what I mean? Either way, though, I don't think the kick itself looks a little bad. I will say, having it come to a complete screeching halt, I feel like does hinder some of the impact that the kick could have had. But the effects are pretty interesting, and it is kind of, I will say, a little strange going from this, right, with the kick, to immediately going to this. I think part of it is the background, for sure, right, because obviously the background changing from, like, these darker colors to then this immediately is very trippy on the eyes. You're like, whoa, hold on, what did I miss? And not to mention, I know that what they're probably trying to do here is, because it's like a similar quote-unquote angle, or you're focused on Gohan's foot, right? They kind of have it so that the foot is the focus, and you're maybe not noticing as much the transition, or at least that's what I would think, because I know Dokkan has done that before, where they have a pose, like, immediately change into another one, but the idea behind it is they're kind of trying to mask it by having it just be the case of, you know, it looks similar, but your brain doesn't really register it until it's all moving already. But this one definitely looks a little bit weird, because Gohan's now so far away from the camera, right? It's kind of like they flipped camera angles, right? It's almost like a football game or something, when, you know, the camera's like at like a high angle, or like it's on like one side of the field and they flip to the other side of the field or something like that, right? Because this would be like obviously closer to Gohan, and then this would be almost closer to Boo. You understand what I'm saying, I think, but it looks a little weird. I do like, though, the way that Gohan looks here. I think it's just a transition that's kind of poor, because obviously this is what we were talking about earlier, where when they make some of the limbs a little bit bigger on the screen, right, and then the rest of the characters a little bit farther away, it's obviously, you know, more of a technique to represent, hey, they're, you know, closer to the camera with that specific body part, rather than the proportions being a little bit weird. Also, I swear this pose, like, reminds me of, I don't remember if it's a box art of Sonic Adventure 1 or 2. I think it's Sonic Adventure 1, the one where he's in that, like, crazy pose, right, with his, like, legs and arms out. This kind of reminds me of that, I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, from that, you then have Gohan flip around, which I feel like the flip is okay. But again, this is another case of, like, there's way too many sliding PNGs in this for me to really feel like that that's the case. And I feel like that they should have a little bit more to it, right? Like, this to this is okay, I guess. There should definitely be one more frame in between here and here. This one is fine, but it is, again, just the same PNG that they're flipping, right? And then they go to here, which I suppose is okay. And then, again, they just kind of turn Gohan. He looks really weird here. This kind of looks like when, like, baby Goku is, like, spinning around in the intro animation of Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Loki, someone should edit that. Someone should grab this Gohan asset and then, like, put that in there, because that'd be kind of funny. But anyway, they then have his back to Boo, right? And then obviously they do have a little bit of minimal movement here as Gohan is kind of setting up for the kick. But as he moves forward, they kind of make it feel a little bit unnatural in the way that he slides. Again, it's like doo-doo, doo-doo. You know that one meme of when characters are like sliding forward but they're not moving? That's what that kind of feels like there. But then they do kind of ready him into position here before they have the kick. I think the whole thing with this sequence is that, like, it doesn't look the absolute worst, but this feels like something that should have been in a Dokkan animation like 3 years ago in the way that this is animated, right? Maybe even a little bit longer ago, right? This definitely doesn't feel like something that belongs in a modern version. Like this the flip sequence specifically feels like something that I could have seen in an animation definitely a few years ago, right? And that's what's so sad about this unit, is that some of this stuff I feel like isn't that bad. It's just that the standard of quality that we hold these animations to these days when it comes to Dokkan animations, this guy does not reach. Like, I feel like for a lot of this stuff, if this guy came out like 3 years ago with these animations or something like that, that would have been what, like 2021-ish? Yeah, I think that's pretty safe to say, right? Didn't the Blue Boys, the SSBK and Blue Evo come out in 2021, and their animations were really, really good, right? I still think their animations are honestly pretty good till now. I feel like that is just one thing that I really like encapsulates this unit. Okay, no, they came out in 2020, so I guess it's even fair to say, I just Googled it real quick. So I guess you could even say that if this guy came out like 4 years ago, right, would maybe even be more appropriate. When it comes down to it, I feel like these animations aren't even that like bad in like a vacuum. It's just that they feel old. Like, I swear that if this guy came out 4 years ago, then I guess that's the, you know, kind of the date that we'll go with here. If that was the case, then I wouldn't feel as bad about this, right? Like, I wouldn't feel as, like, you know, the need to be so harsh on this. But the fact that, you know, it's just how they are in the modern day really kind of turns me off in these animations, because they just don't hold the standard of quality that a 2024 animation should have. And like I was talking about with the Guinea Force, I feel like that should be at least the bare minimum standard, right? And it should be going up from here, and this is definitely going down from there, in my opinion anyway. Also with this kick, it's kind of weird because there doesn't feel like there's a lot of impact on it, and Boo just kind of flies away. Again, it's weird that they hold it there for a second, right? And then he flies. It's also weird having just watched this kick before, where when Gohan kicks Boo, he stays in place after this kick, right? And then a couple seconds later, you have a kick where he stays in place and then just like flies forward. So strange. This animation is really all over the place, man. So then after this, here's what's even weirder, right? It's like, okay, well, Boo is flying forward, and you would think, okay, so they should have Boo, the logical thing here would be to have Boo fly off the screen, right? Because then they could easily transition into another scene and have it feel a lot more natural. But no, what they do is they cut, but you can't really tell this is a cut when you're watching it because the background is so similar. Obviously, because we're looking at it on the frame by frame, we can see that they do indeed cut here, right? The background is not the same, albeit looking extremely similar, right? With that being said, this then feels really awkward because your eyes look at this and go, oh, this is the same background, and now for some reason Boo has just seemingly disappeared and Gohan is teleporting into the scene. By the way, this blur looks really good. It does look very funny out of context. It looks like Gohan's hair is like super huge. But obviously it looks good with him, of course, teleporting in, right? And having it elongated a little bit in the beginning. But then, with him, you know, now being in the scene, they do have a little bit of minimal movement on Gohan, which is nice. But they have Boo flying in from the corner of the screen now, which doesn't make any sense when you're watching this. Let's watch this in full-time speed real quick with this, you know, the flip and then the kick, right? If we go here, right, he gets kicked away. That feels very weird to me, right? It looks a little bit better in full motion, but it just feels very weird. Like, the cut doesn't feel natural. You're like, whoa, what just happened there, is kind of the feeling that I get when I watch that. Very strange. Regardless, this transition between the assets is kind of cool, I will say. I guess this is a good way to do it, where it's like the character's pretty far, and then bam, they're immediately right closer to the screen. And because it's like an impact of a punch, it feels a little bit more natural, because it's supposed to be like, oh, the punch is super weighty because the character changed poses so quickly. It was almost like you didn't see them throw the punch. So I think that's a good way to do it, honestly. We have the character fly away, and again, bro, where did this go in the 12th key? There's a little bit of minimal movement here, right? With Gohan obviously recoiling his body, turning a little bit, right? It's so slight, but it's definitely there, right? And it feels a lot more natural than what we saw before, right? This feels pretty good when it comes to that punch. I feel like a lot of the punches in this and a lot of the kicks haven't had a lot of impact, but that one definitely did, in my opinion. We then have Boo obviously smack against the ground right before we have Gohan grab him. Now, man, this is a certified stinky sprite moment. Like, the thing is, this is not really to the fault of the animation, right? This does look a little bit strange with Gohan's hands kind of just coming in. It kind of feels like that Gohan's hands are just like paper cutouts and they're on little like popsicle sticks and the person is just like holding them to move them into the frame. This is also a little weird because obviously since the sprite is static and you're not actually seeing Gohan grab him, it looks a little bit weird, right? You then get to the scene where he's grabbed, but obviously it doesn't really look super great because, of course, you know, the stinky sprite. Not really to the fault of Gohan's animations necessarily because, of course, you know, you can't make this fit for every single sprite. It's just the way that the game works, but it still looks awkward. Not to mention, going from here to here, I don't know why they didn't have any more frames in between this and this. Also, straight up volleyball move if Super Boo wasn't there. But yeah, like the transition from that one to that one I feel like is a little bit weird. This one's maybe okay. I still feel like there could have been something in between, especially with his legs shifting like that. But then pretty much afterward I think it's okay. Like I feel like this, right, obviously this to this looks fine, and then this one I feel like is a place where they should jump poses because obviously it's supposed to be like he's going "Whoa!" and lifting him up to the sky, right? So I feel like that feels a lot more natural as a place to lift him. And for a pose change to occur. Also, again, stinky sprite moment, right? You can literally see Gohan's hands gripping onto nothing. You can literally see them above Super Boo, right? And they're not actually holding on to anything. You know, maybe Super Boo's leg secretly has an invisible fishing line, you know, or rope attached to it. I don't know. I will say, ironically enough, for the, you know, to give the props to them for, you know, credit where credit is due, Boo's face is perfect for this particular scene and the angle that he's at. If Gohan's hands were actually behind Boo's leg, this would honestly look pretty good if Boo was in HD, because look at Boo's like terrified and actually looking up at Gohan's hands holding him there. Regardless, though, again, it's the same asset that they sort of spin around. This looks so strange out of context. If you saw this out of context, bro, this would be such a weird screenshot if you didn't know how Dokkan worked. But regardless, though, you then have Gohan obviously throw him up to the sky, which I think this shot looks pretty good, right? The anime speed line is really emphasizing this, and obviously a pretty cool angle. And again, the minimal movement. Look at Gohan's hands move a little bit in recoil. Why did they not have that before? Either way, Boo obviously flying up to the heavens there. And then, of course, you have Gohan set up for the Kamehameha, which I think looks really, really good, right? This animation is really long. Holy cow. This kind of doesn't look as good, I feel like. Gohan's face here looks really weird, and I feel like it's not as, like, his head is too buried into his neck, almost, or like his back shoulder is too big or something. His proportions, again, look a little strange here. Also, his face right there is very ugly. I'm not going to lie to you. I feel like the setup is really good for this, like, this shot, but then this just looks a little strange, if I'm being honest with you. Shading's okay, though, right? Obviously, with the lighting from the Kamehameha. And then, right, you obviously have the Carter appear once again, and then we transition into this shot. Now, we're going to talk about this shot later in this video. That tweet that I've been saving for later, this one here, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Also, interesting fun fact, I think that this shot right here is specifically a reference to this particular card from this older thing. Obviously, Goku's art, you know, here was a reference to this old piece of Dragon Ball Z art too, but I thought this was just interesting to point out. This Kamehameha is basically like, you know, exactly that piece of art. But don't worry, we'll talk about this later when we get to this video. Regardless, though, obviously this shot from, you know, basically from the ground up, very interesting. It is kind of cool, right? The angle is obviously one that we've seen before in terms of Dragon Ball stuff. I do like that, again, Gohan's clothes are flapping. It's hard to see because obviously his hair is black and this is a dark background that, you know, if his hair is actually moving, but I think the bang is moving. And this is an interesting transition too, going from like this angle here. What they do, it's a pretty good transition, honestly, with obviously the Kamehameha being fired off, right? They have the white light flash across the screen, and then that provides the transition. I think that's actually really cool. I'm not going to lie. So yeah, then of course we have Gohan blast the enemy, right? Some pretty cool looking effects here. It is nice to see that for this, Gohan's hair is actually flapping in the wind. Again, it's hard to tell if the clothes are because, of course, you know, there's so much going on this scene. But Gohan's hair is definitely flapping in the wind. However, I will say, again, this shot kind of feels like something from a couple years ago of a Dokkan essay. From the way that the Kamehameha effects look to just almost having like a static PNG of Gohan, but of course they still have a little bit of movement on it. This definitely feels like an animation from a couple years ago for me, for sure. They then transition to the shot of the Kamehameha being fired off there, and then basically just the light dissipating. I will say it is a little bit of a disappointment. I will admit that this doesn't end up being the KO screen. I mean, it's always cool when they have a beam effect like fly off, but I kind of almost wished it would have ended here, just so then this could have been the KO screen. Alright, so let's go ahead and watch through our comparisons here. So, man, the animation was so long. That was the 12... Wait, no, okay, yeah, that was the 18 key. No wonder that was so long. I was going to say, holy cow. That was a long animation, bro. Oh my gosh. Alright, so we obviously have these two scenes. Again, very, very cool, right, that they referenced... this particular shot from the manga, right, where Gohan stands up there. Interesting to see, again, obviously for Dokkan. Lately, they've been doing a lot more manga references, but they do tend to use the anime coloring most of the time. Because the interesting thing is that for a lot of the coloring when it comes to the orange geese in Dragon Ball, they're a lot more of this like, oh boy, how do I describe the difference in this orange? It's almost like in the anime, it's more of like an orangish red type of thing, right? Where it's a lot more like orange looking, I guess, in the manga. It's a lot more of a like a lighter orange, I guess, would maybe be the best way to describe it. But it is interesting that the Dokkan use the anime colors, but I guess that makes sense because that's what's the most popular, right? Hydrate or dihydrate, by the way, boys. So, with that being said, we then move on to this, and again, very cool with the reference to this particular piece of art, right? With obviously this particular cover, right? Super cool. Again, I love that they've been, you know, kind of packing in some of these references lately for this type of stuff because it's really, really cool to see. I always like when they do this, and it's nice because a lot of the time in Dokkan history, they didn't used to reference manga panels like this as frequently. They almost basically strictly stuck to the anime, but it's cool to see that they're doing this now. It is interesting, though, because I will say it kind of feels like a detriment in some points because it's pretty easy to tell when a shot is like directly ripped from the manga because there's not a lot of actual animation happening. There's not a lot of movement happening on it. And I think that they still do a good enough job of keeping things moving, even when they are referencing just, you know, a literal PNG of a manga panel. But like with this scene, I still think they did a good job animating it, even though it's clear to tell it's like, oh, well, you know, with the context of this being like, you know, a static PNG, it makes a little bit more sense why this scene doesn't have as much like movement or action, I guess. But I still think that it looks really good for the movement that they added there. So yeah, obviously that kick, right, transitions into that. And I guess that's another thing too, why this feels a little bit awkward, right? With this kick, I don't think that this is a direct. No, that should be. I see what they were going for. Is this another certified Stinky Sprite moment unintentionally? Because this feels like it flows naturally in the anime with like it's just cutting to a different angle of the kick having landed. But I guess it's because the kick isn't planted in Boo's stomach that it feels a little bit weird, and also you're not seeing the back of Boo? Maybe that's why? Interesting. Definitely a little bit weird. Also kind of a shame, again, because the Stinky Sprites are there, right? Like, when Boo hits the ground, you're never going to get cool shots like this. Obviously, Boo's face is contorting, and it looks really funny, right? Because, of course, since it's a Stinky Sprite, right, you're never really going to get something like that, unfortunately. Also kind of interesting with this, too, with that cut that I was talking about earlier, where Gohan kind of teleports in, right? In the anime... Yeah, that is definitely like something that I don't think is the same scene. No wonder why that feels a little bit awkward with the kick to the neck and then having him teleport in. Maybe that is cut from the same scene. I'm not sure because obviously Jihad just takes the scenes and then splices them together. But regardless, also interesting that Gohan is in a hole when that happens for the particular shot over here. And not to mention, he also grabs Boo's head tail. But because Stinky Sprite, you know, he's obviously grabbing the leg. Also interesting that that's the closest reference that he could find for that angle of the Kamehameha. Yep, there's the card art, right? Okay, interesting from Kakarot. Let's see what Kevin X has to offer for this particular animation. Let's see what the boy's cooking with. That's definitely the anime I love. Oh yeah, okay. So seeing the difference between like how it is positioned in the manga and how it's positioned in the anime. This is definitely Toriyama, yeah, for sure. Because that scene of Gohan stanced up like that, I don't think is actually even in the anime. Like, he's referencing the closest thing right there. The jump. Yeah, so obviously the kick is a lot more closer to the manga version. Oh! Interesting that he kind of chose that as the reference, because that kind of feels a little bit more like closer to it, right? Obviously this particular part would have been cool for a little close-up, but interesting. Yeah, so obviously this again is supposed to be this, right? Where is that impact frame? Yeah, they've been so good about keeping the impact frames. True. We were literally just talking about that 5 seconds ago. As for the Kamehameha, the angle reminded me of a lot of DBS ones. Proceeds to show a clip from DBZ. That's funny. Yeah, it's probably like not exactly anything. Yeah, so this was something that because of this angle, naturally assume it comes from Super Saiyan 3. Boo. Yeah. But it is definitely a little strange how close it is to the Dokkan animation. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Very interesting that there's not an exact reference for a lot of this stuff when it comes to the Gohan Kamehameha. Oh yeah, that does kind of look like that Kamehameha from the Tournament of Power with the angle. Interesting. It could just be coincidence for sure. That's the thing, right? Like, some of this is so clear when it comes to like the references, but then some of it is like, well, they could have used it as a reference, like reference material, but it's clearly not like a direct reference to what they're making in Dokkan, because it's not like the one-to-one, you know, like frames like you've seen in, you know, some other stuff, where, you know, like clearly some of the manga panels being referenced and some of the anime shots, you know, and all that type of stuff. Very, very interesting. Yeah, it does kind of look like that for sure. All right, so now we move on to the unit super attack. Oh boy, this is gonna be a bit of a doozy. So this is Piccolo Shaft time. It's kind of funny that Piccolo is even on the team, right? I don't know why they always do these awful team compositions for these units, right? Like, what is the team that they're rocking here? Let's see. We have, so, LR Gohan, right? We have Super Saiyan 3 Int Gotenks. We have Unawakened Fizz SSR Piccolo. We have R Goten. We have, I'm pretty sure that's SR Trunks. Shin and Kibito, I think. And then we have the Hercule where he's like dying. I know it's supposed to be like the characters who are present in the scene, right? Like, that's what it's supposed to be, but they couldn't choose better units. I don't know. I appreciate the thematics, but hydrate or dihydrate, baby. It always feels just a little bit strange when they do stuff like this, because it's like, bro, SSR Piccolo, y'all can't do a better job? I don't know. It's just for the sake of the animation, though, so I guess it's fine. Alright, so again, the unit super here is with Gotenks. He does not have a unit super with Piccolo, which again is so strange. Like, why even include him on the card art then? I'm not really sure. Again, I understand that he's in the intro, but when there's characters in some of these animations that don't actually have like a proper attack animation with the character, I guess they're usually not included with, you know, like, they're not included in the card art most of the time is the thing, right? That's what's so strange about it. I don't know. Very, very weird. Regardless, though, let's go to the beginning of the 18 key. So obviously this shot is the, actually, is it exactly the same? Let's see. It kind of looks like it's from a different angle. Oh no, it is exactly the same. Okay, you can see from the little preview there. Yeah. So this is the exact same shot, right? And obviously this is pretty cool that, you know, they set up like it's going to be like, oh, you know, it's kind of like it's the same shot where Gohan stands up like this, right? But it's cool because they, you know, immediately slide the camera and you're like, oh, huh? Gotenks is joining the fray? And it's kind of funny, too. I wish there was a little bit more of like an expression change, but Gohan's expression here is so funny when Gotenks jumps in here, right? Gotenks jumping in looks really good, by the way. And the Super Saiyan hair looks super flowy. Super Saiyan 3 hair. It is kind of unfortunate, I will say, that they just go from this to this. Again, this should definitely have been a lot better of a transition from having him land, right? Again, some literally, like, years ago Dokkan animation type of thing. But it's kind of funny that, like, you know, Gohan's expression is just like, huh? Regardless, I do like this setup, right? I think it's pretty cool, right? And then obviously have the boys, you know, set up and ready to fight, right? Returning to Gohan's position. It's like, okay, Gotenks is going to join, right? So that's a pretty cool establishing shot. I think this cut is fine, right? Obviously cutting to the shot from a little bit more far away here, right? Where obviously you have the boys stanced up. It's interesting too that they're not at an angle anymore, but I guess maybe it's just because they're looking for the front side rather, because obviously, you know, Gohan is kind of like turned almost like this, and then of course here, right, you can see that it's Gotenks and him looking forward. But we then go here, right? Obviously, Gotenks flies forward. This shot of Gotenks is so gassed, dude. Oh my gosh. They cooked so hard on some of these Gotenks shots. I'm not going to hold you. This looks amazing, right, with Gotenks here. The electricity, a little bit of the minimal movement on the arms, too, like, and his jacket fluttering in the wind, bro. Why'd they give Gotenks more love than they did to Gohan? He looks amazing, right? The electricity, too. The aura effect, even. You obviously have the little headbutt there. This animation is okay, I guess, in terms of the headbutt, right? It definitely feels like it has a lot of impact as he's flying in, right? And obviously that pose change there is perfect to emphasize the impact, right? You have that little bit of the spark effect too, not just on Gotenks, but obviously on Boo as well. But it is kind of weird when he flies away, they just sort of spin the PNG a little bit. It's a little bit more than that because obviously his upper body is tilting, right, a little bit more, but still, right, with just the headbutt happening and then just kind of like letting that happen, it feels a little bit weird. But we then have the same kick again from Gohan, right, obviously leading into the same animation from before, right, where we then have the little flip, and then of course we have the kick. Now here, maybe this is why they low-key butchered it in the regular 18-key super attack and why it doesn't make as much sense with the transition, because it's meant for the unit super attack, because this feels like it flows a lot better, even though Boo should still be flying off camera to make this feel a lot more natural. This feels a lot better with, you know, your brain being like, okay, he's flying in this direction, and then it makes more sense that he would come off that side of the camera, right? With then Gotenks flying in there. That feels a lot more natural to me than the way it was executed in the normal 18 key. I genuinely wonder if they just were like, screw it, it doesn't really matter, it's not that big of a deal for the normal 18 key, and they just wanted to prioritize the unit super attack, and that's why that feels a little bit like choppy in that way. Very interesting. Regardless, you have Gotenks come down and then jump again, bro. Like, the little bit of minimal movement they have on Gotenks throughout this is really good, right? With him coming down to the ground, right, they actually have him, you know, like steady himself a little bit, which is really cool. And then he jumps to his other foot, do a little tap dance. But yeah, then obviously after that, they actually have him lean forward and jump off the ground, which looks really good. Like, why do they cook on some of this and some of it is just so lackluster? I don't understand, bro. So you then have him come up, and again, like, even just the next scene, why did they just have it be a flip of the PNG, bro? Like, actually make him kick. And then they mask it by not actually having him move, right? To have this impact frame here of then the kick happening up on Boo. They shake the screen a little bit. And again, it's just a static PNG. They don't have any minimal movement on the boy Gotenks here. Why? They have it in some parts here, but they don't in others. Again, this feels like a Dokkan animation from years ago. I sound like a broken record at this point, but it's true, right? So this transition, I will say, is really good. I'm not going to lie. Going from here, right, with obviously Boo flying off camera, then transitioning to here, that is a good transition right there. But of course, we then have Boo fly up towards the sky, and dude, this shot of Gotenks is so good too. Oh my gosh. The Super Saiyan 3 not having eyebrows looks really funny in this scene, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's very, because there's so much like skin tone on the screen, you really notice, you're like, whoa, there are no eyebrows on that bad boy. But yeah, Gotenks with his hand out looks really good, right? I like this little zoom in, and this is pretty cool, right? It's a little bit of a mixed bag for me, and I'll explain to you why, again, when we get to that little comparison video at the end of the video. But it is cool because, obviously, it sort of references Super Saiyan 3 Goku's animation, right? In the way that, like, the camera turns, and then, obviously, you have the Ki Blast. Right, you then have it turn in transition into the card art with Gohan and Gotenks there, which is a pretty cool way to go into the card art. I will say, It's kind of weird sometimes when they do this, because I really like it when they do the animation where it flows well into the card art, but sometimes I feel like it's a little forced, right? And I feel like this is an instance where it kind of feels like it's a little bit forced, like they were almost like obligated to include the animation transitioning into the card art, or they were almost obligated to include a reference to the card art in the animation like this. Either of the two, right? It kind of feels a little bit more tacked on, like they didn't have to do that and they could have done something else that was a little bit more original, but they either just wanted to reference the card art, or it's like, well, we gotta do it type of thing. Ironically enough, that's kind of how I feel, you know, about my beloved Gohan Beast, right? With the unit super attack with Orange Piccolo, right? Because the unit super attack directly transitions into the card art, right? It's literally the PNG from the card art. I mean, it's not literally the same PNG, but, you know, it's like the same picture, right? And then it transitions into the card art, right? And that, to me, feels a little bit forced, especially with that one, right? It looks a little bit more like the card art, where this is definitely a difference between, like, obviously the shading on the card art, right? And then obviously the, you know, more animation-looking assets here. But regardless, though, you get my point. It kind of feels like they're just, you know, forcing it in. Regardless, though, after the card art is up on the screen, we then have the boys blast, which is pretty cool, right? I definitely like this, with this shot of them basically blasting away. Cool that you do see, finally, again, some more minimal movement, right? Gotenks' hair and clothes is flapping in the wind, although, is Gohan's? Yeah, Gohan's is a little bit... It's kind of hard to tell. I feel like they don't... If it is, it's really hard to tell for this, because Gotenks is a lot more obvious with the Obi belt and his hair flapping, but I feel like they should have made Gohan's hair flap a little bit more to make it a little bit more obvious. By the way, sorry if you can hear, somebody's mowing their lawn outside my house, or blowing leaves or something like that. Sorry if you can hear that. But anyway, yeah, I feel like they should have made it a little bit more obvious on Gohan. Again, by the way, in regards to the Piccolo thing, bro, like, why don't they just have Piccolo, like, literally just jump in here and then, like, blast the enemy just to, like, if they're gonna go all the way with the card art, right? I mean, I know it's because he's not even firing anything there, and obviously, again, I guess it's supposed to be like, this is literally him from the intro, especially even the pose, but why don't they have my boy just, like, jump in and fire a Ki Blast, bro? Like, there's no harm in it. At this point, bro, you're already doing all this. You may as well just have Piccolo, like, jump down, almost like Goku did in the Family Kamehameha against Broly, right? Like, at this point, bro, just bring the big green man in. Get my boy in here. Justice for Piccolo, for real, for real. But anyway, I think the Ki Blast looks good. The actual energy on the Ki does look very, very good. And of course, you have it blast up onto Boo there, right? With these little bit of the impact frames there. And then, of course, having him dissolve. Now, actually, I think I'll... No. We'll save it for the end. I will save it for the end, because there's some stuff in the active skill, too, that is something that will be referenced in here. There may be a reason as to you thinking on this animation being like, man, that Ki Blast looks a little bit familiar. And man, the character disintegrating before my very eyes looks a little familiar. Don't worry, we'll get to it later in the video, my friend. So let's go ahead real quick and then look at the, almost said Ultra Super, the unit super attack reference here, right? So kind of interesting that they take it from a bunch of different scenes here. Obviously, again, reusing the references from this because, of course, you know, it's just different references from this. Kind of interesting the way that they splice it together, though, and then obviously there isn't like a direct reference to this. But, yeah. Okay, so I didn't even realize it was in Jihad's video. So let's talk about this a little bit now, because obviously it's here. Actually, let's see if iKevinX includes it, and then we'll talk about it there. So, yep. With Gotenks coming in, yeah. Oh, they actually reference that expression from the manga. That's really cool. Yeah, it's obviously the same thing, right? The headbutt, right? That shot right there. Of course, the Gohan references, once again. Gotenks jumping. Oh, wow, they got the impact frame exactly. That's cool. Oh, and even the little tippy tap that he does to jump. Okay, that's really cool. Ooh. Oh. Yo, that's super sick. I don't even recognize that shot. That's awesome, though. That'd be cool if they included that for sure. Yeah, so obviously, again, they could have put... wait, what did he say there for this? Could have put Goku as a side for maximum hair. Yeah, I guess it could have just been like a little ghost of Goku there, right? Interesting. Okay, yeah, so it definitely looks like it is a little bit of a reference to that, possibly, for sure. But I will say, here is the thing, right? And this is something that little video at the end that's going to talk about. But we'll talk about it right now because obviously it's in Jihad's video as well. It is a little bit of a shame, honestly, that it is quite literally just 1-to-1 with Goku. Because it definitely, like, I don't know, there's some times in Dokkan where cards reference each other's animations, and it feels like a cool thing. But again, this just feels kind of lazy. It's like they saw this card art, and they were like, okay, so we made this card art, like the whole reference with Goku is this card art. And we're going to do that with these guys. But we'll literally just copy the animation from Goku and slap it onto Gohan here. That to me feels a little bit disingenuous and honestly kind of lazy. Because the thing is, like, for the angle, they could have definitely, like, kept that, obviously. That's fine, right? They're trying to reference this piece of art. That's, like, what all of these cards are trying to reference, right? Like, I get it, right? Doing, like, this, right, is okay, I guess, right? And obviously, with Goku being there, right, in the same position, right? Obviously, having these guys, right? Like, that, I guess, is okay. I think the problem that I have more so is that this section here, right, with the key flying up towards the enemy, the way that the blast is literally exactly the same, right? Maybe it's just except for a little bit of the glow, and then with the way that the enemy disintegrates. And even the impact frames are exactly the same. The impact frames are 1-to-1, right? With, like, the energy basically supposed to be, like, you know, flying through the enemy here, right? After the blast is shot, and then right about here, I believe. It's the exact same. Are you kidding me? The least that they could have done, right? Again, keep the card art reference. That's fine. But the least that they could have done is just had a different angle for the ki blast. Like, I know it's like, oh, it's because that they're at this angle that it feels a little bit more natural for it to then, like, go like this, right? But if you're just going to copy it from another card, just do something more unique, man. Like, you know, and not to mention, even if you wanted to have this angle, right? At least do some different impact frames, bro. Like, that's the least I could ask of you. You know, at least have it be a little bit different in that, right? Don't just copy it 1-to-1. And then again, like, because it's this angle, right, that is coming from the, you know, like the bottom right corner, they do this same thing again. So, like, I get why, but just make it something original. That's what I'm asking. Like, don't copy it directly from another animation. That's just straight up laziness, bro. That is just straight up being lazy. Like, I don't really think there's any good excuse for that. And I know this is kind of ironic because we were talking about in Goku's video with the intro, right? That was a little bit of a different case in my opinion because of the fact that they're referencing the scene that it came from. And definitely, right, as I talked about in that video, they could have changed it up. They could have used some more different assets, right, to make it look a little bit more different. But again, they were doing it because it was pretty much as close to the scene as it could be. Again, there's always room for improvement, right? That's undeniable. And I do think that they definitely could have improved the intro. That was probably the thing that I had the biggest problem with when it came to Goku's animations, to be honest. And I talked about that a lot in that video. But I think the bigger problem with this is that it's not referencing the anime or anything like that, right? This is clearly just the same super attack reused. It's not like a quirky reference that's like, oh, it's so cool, you know, that these cards, like, reference each other because of, like, the relationship that they share and whatever. It's like, no, this is just being lazy. This is just Dokkan reusing stuff because they can cut corners and they can just sell you the same thing again. Frankly, it's unacceptable, honestly. I feel like, in my opinion anyway. I think this is another example of something that's like, dude, this is not okay. Like, this isn't even an example of something that's like, oh, you know, this is an animation from a couple years ago. This is just straight up reusing, recycling, right? I don't know, man. It's kind of a weird situation. I'm not going to lie with you. It is interesting, too, because it makes me feel almost a little bit better looking at iKevinX's, like, reference here, because it's like, maybe they were trying to go for this, but, like, bro, I feel like, you know, obviously iKevinX is just trying to show the reference. It's not like he's trying to hide it or something like that, that it was a reference to Super Saiyan 3. He was just looking at the reference, and he's like, yeah, that's the thing that looks the closest to me. But it's clear to me that Dokkan was just, you know, being a little bit of a bum in this case, right? Alright, so let's finally look at the active skill, Rant Over. And let me actually take a drink of water real quick before we actually get started. So, hydrate or dihydrate, ladies and gentlemen. And let's get into it. Holy cow, this is going to be a long one. This one's going to be like movie length for this particular animation analysis video. Holy cow. All right, so we now go to the active skill. Of course, the establishing shot of Gohan, the iconic shot of the man. I will say, I need to look at this real quick, bro. I'm sorry, I need it before. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I need to see this. How does his face look in this particular shot? So why is his face like crooked in the Dokkan one? That's what I want to know. Because I know that this is a case probably of, like I was talking about before, in the faces with a lot of this, right? Even though some of them still looked a little bit janky, I feel like the faces look a lot more consistent than they do in the anime. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say, right? But even so, sometimes in the effort or in the, like, I don't even know what you would call it, just like, you know, them trying to make the faces a little bit more consistent and change them from the anime, sometimes you end up with stuff like this where it almost looks worse than it does in the anime, right? Like, why does his face, like, his face looks too small for his head? It's kind of funny. I almost feel like his head looks too small in the anime, right? Compared to how big his face is. And in the Dokkan one, his face looks too big. Or, I'm sorry, his, like, head looks too big for his face. His face looks too small, rather. But the expression is just so weird. Like, I understand what they're going for, but I think the little bit of the cocked eye there really makes this feel like a little bit of an awkward face. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it looks a little uncanny, almost, if I'm being honest with you. But at least the, you know, the beginning establishing shot here looks really good. I think this may... Is that Tech Ultimate... Hold on. Now I need to see this. Is this Tech Ultimate Gohan? He should be right here. It's not the exact same PNG, is it? No, I don't think it's the exact one. The face looks a little bit different. And also, obviously, it is flipped. So it would look a little bit weirder because obviously the face is looking that way and the eye is big there. And the eye is bigger on this side of his face. On this one, right? What would that be? The right side of his face, right? The eye is bigger. And if you flip the PNG, right? Because here it's the left side of his face. The eye is a little bit bigger. But even if you just flipped it, the bang would still be closer to the bigger eye, whereas here, you know, the bang is closer to the smaller eye. So, okay, it's not exactly the same PNG. I was about to be like, yo, that would be wild if that was the case. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I don't really like the way his face looks here. I get what they were going for, but I just don't really think it works that well. Also, holy moly, the more I look at this PNG, the worse it gets. This is a story asset from years ago, is basically what this looks like to me, right? It's not literally. This almost looks like GT Gohan. With, like, the way that this, like, style of the art looks and the way that his hair looks. This reminds me a lot more of GT Gohan than it does, like, Ultimate Gohan from the Buu Saga. This looks like one of those, like, story assets that's like when the characters are talking in between scenes kind of thing, right? When they're having a conversation, but obviously it's like from the back. Probably just because of the thickness of the lines, but like Gohan's hair looks too, like, jagged here, right? Like the bangs, even if we look at Tech Ultimate Gohan's art again, they're supposed to be, or the bangs, like the ends of the hair is supposed to be a little bit more short and choppy, not these like big chunks like this. He almost kind of looks like he's Super Saiyan without being Super Saiyan. But anyway, the little power-up looks alright. Obviously, we have the little dust cloud. I do like that they have the hair move there at least. Again, transition, right? There isn't really one here. It is basically just going from this. And again, I feel like this looks a little awkward with the how choppy this is, right? You have the wind basically die down, and then immediately you cut to this. I feel like this would be a lot better in terms of like, oh my gosh, he's on the move and he's moving quickly. If there was a little bit more of a smoother transition, or maybe you had Gohan coming from like off screen or a little bit closer to the left side of the screen, because to me this just feels a little bit awkward in execution. But you do have this iconic shot, right, of Gohan hitting Buu there, which looks okay. I still feel like this looks a little bit awkward to me, to be honest with you. It's not terrible, but there's something about it that just feels like the movement's a little awkward. And not to mention, again, the impact of the punch, I feel like, is another thing here that really, like, is just super lacking. It really feels like it has no impact, especially with the character just, like, staying there, right? Funny enough, they kind of did the thing I was talking about before, where the character moves forward a little bit, right? Like when they get hit, right? They kind of slide a little bit. But usually that's followed up immediately by them moving quickly again. Not to mention, I feel like it's awkward because they're moving a little bit there, but then obviously Boo is in this stance like he's already gotten hit almost before the hit even happens. But again, that's kind of a stinky sprite moment. I definitely feel like there could have been more movement throughout this whole thing, though, too. Like, basically going from 1, 2, 3, and then it's like, oh, they're just saying that he impacted him with having the impact frame here. Doesn't look that good, in my opinion. We have the kick, though, right? The kick from the back, right? That's pretty cool with the blue background, and I like the angle. That is a super cool effect there with the kick slashing across the screen, basically, right? Like with the back of his foot. That's super cool looking. I definitely like that. The kick extended, right? That's cool. And again, there you go. There you go, Gohan. He's got it. Go, Gohan, right? He's got a little bit of that minimal movement on the kick after obviously having kicked the enemy, right? Also, I will say, this is definitely another stinky sprite moment, but the angle of where the kick is in comparison to where Boo is, I feel like is a little bit janky, and especially like the scaling between the two of them. But again, that's just the sprites. Regardless, though, you see that Gohan actually moves his leg a little bit back and his arms, right? So again, minimal movement there. I really like that angle, too. Again, it's sort of like that thing where his foot is closer to the camera, so they elongate it, right? But then you have him basically bring it back again. Why is there only one frame here? This is something that old Dokkan animations do. We're way past this standard of quality. He should be, you know, having movement where he's actually moving his leg back down, right? Even to here, right? I feel like there should be a little bit more frames in between this and this of him lowering himself to the ground. Regardless, though, you then have him stretch down, right? And obviously then have him jump, which does look really good. And then you have the rapid fire, I believe, sequence of punches. Oh, no. Okay, so it's just the one quick punch. That's right. With this, right? Again, it just feels like kind of lacking. I like the jump, but then the actual, like, punch itself, right? Just, again, feels like it doesn't have a ton of impact behind it. I like that shot of, obviously, the close-up of his face. But again, the way that these assets look and the way that the PNG slide, I know thankfully his arms do move a little bit here, but this looks like a really old Dokkan animation for sure, even like this jump in the pose change. Yeah, the impact frame is pretty cool, and again, it's a good way to kind of mask the hits so they don't have to animate it. Also a little bit weird. I mean, I guess this is a little bit more natural because obviously it's like the camera is panning backwards almost with Gohan holding that pose. So that is kind of cool, right? But then you have this shot, which does actually look really good of Gohan flying up. Should he be flipped? Oh, no. Okay, actually, that does make sense in the context of then, right? He like kind of ends up behind Boo. Although it's weird that they have him in this pose and then they don't really show him, like, transitioning his arms to here. I mean, I guess it's just assumed that it's off camera, but I feel like that would have been cool to see. Regardless, though, very nice anime background. I love the aura on Gohan here as well. What the heck was that? Why was that so choppy? Wait. Okay, so it feels like they literally just, like, gave up at the end. What? Wait, so, okay, so you have him ready it up. You have the white impact frame to be like, okay, he hit him. Right? There's no movement on anybody here. Just the screen shaking and the aura. And then they cut to this, where his arm is already then fully extended. What is this, bro? Are you kidding me? Nah. Nah, that's kind of vile. I'm not going to hold you. That's just super awkward. It's so clunky. We need to watch that in full motion. Let me see this again. Yeah, that's just so, like, weird, the way that it's executed. We're gonna have to see how that's referenced in the anime. Whoops. Watching this in full-time speed. Yeah, that looks, at least to me, I feel like that looks really weird. Let's go back to that again. My eyes, like, kind of hurt looking at that, trying to focus on what's happening. It's hard to tell what's even going on. We're going to have to look at that in 2x speed. After we look at the references for the active skill, we'll watch this in 2x speed, and then we'll talk about that final video, and then we'll be cooking. So, after that, we have this shot where it's like Gohan saying, you can't win, right? I do like the dust, actually, in the foreground, right? Having it kind of dissipate a little bit. You know, having it move off camera like that. Very, very cool shot here, I will say. Now, I know a lot of people have been like, dude, what is wrong with Gohan's face? funny enough, it basically does look like this in the anime, right? I know it's kind of funny because it does look like a little awkward. I won't hold you. I do like as well how they kind of have this, like, he's colliding with the ground. I don't know why there's, like, fire in there. It's like almost like this was like a key blast explosion when it's just him hitting the ground. That's a little bit weird. But I do like that it's sort of like implied, I guess, that Gohan landed in the meantime, and then the dust is used as a transition into, you know, Gohan's face, right, of his body panning up from that. That is a super sick transition. I won't lie to you. That is really, really cool. I love the way that dust, again, is in the foreground and the background here. That is super cool. Let's look at the references for this, then we'll look at this in 2 times speed, okay? Oh, man. I feel like I've gotten more of a negative opinion of this guy's animations after doing this video so far. That does happen sometimes, though, when it comes to these videos. Sometimes I feel like my opinion becomes lesser of a unit after, you know, I, like, really look at the details of it. Okay, so, alright, so I guess they're trying to reference that manga panel there. Okay, yeah. I guess that kind of makes sense. So how does this look in the anime? I can't tell if he cut it like that or if that's how it's cut in the anime. Very interesting, though. Yeah, so it's supposed to be this, right? Like, that's why it looks so weird in terms of, like, the reference, right? Because it's supposed to be this manga panel. But I feel like this manga panel looks a lot better, in my opinion, actually, for this one, right? I feel like they were trying to kind of, like, fix the face, but they sort of overdid it a little bit. I would have honestly preferred if they would have just done this, because I feel like this shot with the anime looks so much better, honestly, than what the final product in Dokkan looked like. But let's see the Yikes version. So let's see what my boys got for the references. Yep. Yep. Okay. The dust makes sense. So, interesting that it's from the other side. My complaint with Gohan's Burst Rush is that the Stinky Sprite, yes! I love that that's become a term now because of me. Yeah, the Stinky Sprite definitely ruins a lot of it. It's interesting that it's from a different angle here. It's from, like, the other side in the manga, but I think the other interesting thing here, too, is that it's clear they're kind of trying to reference the anime, because look at the angle is, like, vastly, or they're trying to reference the manga, rather, I'm sorry, because the angle in the anime is vastly different than how it is in that shot in Dokkan. Also interesting, let me go back to that with here. The actual kick, right? It's from the back in the Dokkan one. I guess that kind of makes more sense, sort of, with the way that the kick is executed. Interesting. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, because look at this is like he's striking Boo's head, but obviously it doesn't really make sense in the Dokkan one with the, you know, like the proportions of the sprites, the scaling. Very interesting. Okay, yeah, so I guess that kind of makes sense why that also feels a little bit more awkward, because it's almost like the scenes are kind of cut together when it comes to the, like, the kick, right? Like, X, right, has the jump there. And then, I don't know, it just feels very choppy in the way that everything is, like, put together. Like, a lot of the times when Dokkan, like, strings scenes together like this, I feel like they do such a good job of making it feel like one coherent thing, but it feels very choppy and very clunky in this instance, I feel like. Interesting that he's flying upside down as well, but in the Dokkan one, I guess they kind of can't do that because it's a vertical game, right? Interesting. Yeah, I feel like that shot still looks really awkward in Dokkan, honestly. Very interesting. Yeah, I don't know, man. They definitely kind of, I feel like that face on the active skill is definitely a little whack. Let's see. What did X say at the end, right? What can I say about this Gohan? I love him. I thought it's a shame of the stinky sprites, but we always have the same, but we always have the assets and the Dokkan Wiki to view them without. True. Shame about not being able to get the full roster, though. Yeah, true. That would have been cool to have a Goku Gotenks like combo with Gohan as well. Thank you to both of the boys, by the way, as always, for providing these videos. Both of them, obviously, you know, have given me express permission to be like, yeah, go for it, bro. Use these whenever you want. So thank you. Of course, you know, links to both of these videos will be in the description below. Definitely go check them out. Always appreciate the boys, you know, basically just letting me use their content for the sake of some context for all of you. Now, here's what I want to do. Before we get to that final little thing that we got to look at, I want to look at the 2x speed of this, because I know a lot of people have been saying that these, well, I mean, okay, obviously the intro doesn't really count because that won't be in 2x speed. It's only the super attacks that obviously will be in 2x speed. So let's see. Okay. 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 They definitely look a little better. Obviously, oh yeah, and the unit super attack will also be in 2 times speed. I kind of forgot about that because it's a super, not an active skill. I guess it definitely does look better in 2 times speed. That's still vile, bro. I guess it does look a little better in 2 times speed for sure. But I feel like if an animation has to be in 2 times speed to like look good, I don't feel like it is good at its core. You know what I mean? Because like the funny thing about it is that I know we always say that it's like, oh, you know, it'll look good in 2 times speed because like basically everybody plays the game in 2 times speed because obviously you'd be in events so much longer if you're watching the animations like, you know, without the double speed. But the animations are technically meant to be played in 1 time speed. It's just that obviously 2 times speed is there as like a convenience for the player, right? So I don't know. I don't really think that that's a solid excuse, right? I think that it definitely, sure, they do look a little bit more like flowing in 2 times speed, but it's just because it's all happening so fast and it feels like it's a lot better, right? When at its core, it's still not great, in my opinion. So before I give my final thoughts, which I think are probably pretty clear by now, to be honest with you, but let's take a look at this little video. So this person here, this was a Japanese user who commented under the animations for them, right? And was basically giving a little bit of a comparison with the past Dokkan productions, such as the 2020 Gohan, right? First one might be based on a different scene. So basically, he was, funny enough, also, the reason why this is the global one and not the JP one, even though this is a Japanese user, is because the global animations dropped before the Japanese ones did. But anyway, yeah, so again, like we were talking about before, it kind of feels like a direct reference to this scene, right? Or I guess in this case, right, this Dokkan animation, which I don't know, man. That's another one that's a little bit of a toss-up. Like, I suppose you could kind of chalk that up to be them being lazy. But again, they're literally referencing this like little card art here. I feel like that one's a little bit of a toss-up, but I feel like it's definitely something I just wanted to include in the video because I felt like it was just an important piece of information for you to have, the viewer. And besides that, right, I believe what he shows next, yeah, is this. So again, right, obviously we talked about this earlier, that it is, you know, quite literally like 1-to-1 with the Ki Blast, which is honestly unacceptable in my opinion. So here was the comparison that I really wanted to show you that I thought was kind of interesting, right? With the, you know, obviously the original, the boy, Tech Ultimate Gohan, right? I'm not going to hold you. I don't know if this is just nostalgia talking. I think I genuinely like Tech Ultimate Gohan's better. Like, I understand that the animation itself and like the stylization and everything is technically better in the LR, but in terms of the execution and everything, even though it's newer, I honestly think I just like the original one better. Like, it's clear that they, you know, improved on the animation, right? Like throughout the years, the way that it looks, you know, some of like the more minimal animations here, but I feel like just the flowing movement and the impact of the punches and everything, like, it feels like, I don't know, I just like the 2021 better, I think. I like the Tech Ultimate Gohan animation better, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I think it's just, like, better to look at, I guess would be the best way to put it. I don't know, it's kind of a weird feeling to describe, because saying that, you know, a unit that old compared to the newer unit I like better. Obviously this is of course for the active skill specifically, because of course that's the animation that you can compare it to. But I want to know your guys' thoughts on that in the comments section. What do you think about, you know, not only this, but obviously the little thing of the, you know, Goku, you know, basically having his animation yoinked and copied, to like the comparison between the, you know, 2021. And I'll leave this tweet linked in the description below as well, of course. You know, what do you think about this? Because I'd be really curious to hear your guys' thoughts on all of this. But with that being said, my final thoughts on these animations, man. Frankly, I think I'm more disappointed than when we started. I think I honestly feel worse about these animations than when this video began. Because after dissecting them and analyzing them, I genuinely feel like that these are some animations that, like, I don't think that this was actually the case. But it kind of feels like to me that this is sort of the thing that, like, there's been a couple instances of this in Dokkan history. It kind of feels like they had this one in the vault for a really long time. And then they were just like, all right, now's the time to release it, you know, bring it out, you know, get that boy out of the vault. He's been sitting animated for a couple years. And I know that that's not actually, nano jump scare again, bro. YouTube's tripping. I know that's not actually how it works, obviously, right? Because, of course, you know, that's just not how production for a game works like that, really. But it definitely kind of feels like that. I honestly think, yeah, I guess this guy's animations really kind of make me feel like this guy's like a 2020 LR. You know, I don't know if that's an exaggeration to say. I don't even really think so, considering, like, you know, like I was saying, the Fizz Blue Boys, their animations are fantastic, and I feel like they're honestly comparable to this unit's animations, and they came out in 2020, so, yeah, honestly, overall, I guess I'm kind of disappointed with this Gohan's animations, which is really a shame to say. I know I want to summon for him just because I want another good Link buddy for Gohan Beast, to be honest with you, for some hybrid Saiyan shenanigans, but I don't know, man. Like, there is some good stuff in these, right? Like, there is some stuff that I pointed out that I'm like, man, there's some shots in here that I really, really like. And you know, I'm not going to deny that, right? There's some stuff in here that is really, really good. But I feel like just the overall quality is very disappointing and feels like it's from a couple years ago. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. I'd definitely be curious to hear your opinion on this. And with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Really, really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy. Let me know if you are going to be summoning for Gohan, and I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.